Hey everyone, this is the second video of my procedural generation project, so let's take a look at what's happening with this. Let's hit play. Alright, let's generate. Oh well, it's playing nicely today. So it's still a work in progress, but fortunately there's no bugs with this one. At the moment, the rooms generate based on each other rather than a giant grid, which some methods use. So the entire method is variable and you can adjust the number of rooms, the size of the rooms, the number of doors that lead to another room, and so on. So let's say this is the starting room, and it's generated one door. So it's going to create a hallway. It's going to lead to this room, which has only one door, and so on and so on. And with each room, it's going to randomly delete some floors, and it's going to automatically generate walls and pillars to match it. Alright, so that's behaved well. Let's do some more generations to highlight some of the bugs that are here thus far. It's this one. What's going on here? I see. So what's happened here is that it's generated this room, it's gone to here, but this room has generated a door to its south, and thus it's going to spawn another room to the south, and it's overlapped on top of each other. That kind of fix is pretty simple to solve. We just simply do not allow it to spawn a south-facing door when it's spawning north, and that's simple to do. But it's not 100% complete. This is just a work in progress to show where I am thus far with it. So one bug, let's see if we can get it to work, is that the rooms don't check for collision between each other. So we could, in theory, have like this room. Yeah, it's done it again. This room could spawn to the left, and then it could spawn another one to the south, and we'd have two rooms overlapping here. But we'll get to that another time. There's some things we still need to fix. Another thing is that the rooms don't check for a valid path yet. That's something I need to work on. At the moment, it forces a floor where the door is, but that's it. So in theory, randomly spawned, it can not create a valid path for you to walk through. In fact, if I go into the horribly horrendous blueprints that I have, which are not very optimized, well, you'll see the horrible unoptimization later, but let's crank this up to 12. So instead of removing 3 floor tiles, it's going to remove 12, which in a 5x5 room, that's nearly half. In fact, let's up it to 18. That'll just 100% showcase what I mean. So there you go. There's no valid floor paths. So let's go back to the blueprint and show the modularity of this entire project. So you can increase the room size or decrease the room size. It all works fine. So we've gone from a 5x5 to an 8x8 size. It spawns some rooms on each other. Let's see if we can get a nice better one. There we go, that's a little better. It's done it there, but you can see the idea that the rooms generate based on like the room size, so they will spawn naturally in accordance to how big the previous room was. At the moment they're all the same size, they're not varying, but that'll be another feature that I can look to make it much better. Let's go back to the blueprints, set it to 5x5. It works with 3x3 as well. You can go smaller than that. Probably 3x3 is the limit. It might get a little sketchy at 2x2, and 1x1 is what's the point. So let's return that to 5. So let's go into this. Now I warn you, this is horribly unoptimized. A lot of the blueprints could be put into their own separate functions, and a lot of things are repeated more than once. Yeah, kind of like here. There's just very much. They all do the same thing, kinda. For here, for example, which I'll get into in a minute. But the separation helps just for debugging. So here's the entire thing now. Compared to last time, it's grown a little. And I won't go into the entirety and the complexities of it because let's not make this a 30-minute video. I'm not sure who would watch that for starters, but we're going to set the variables. We're going to make sure that the first room isn't the spawn room. At the moment this is redundant, but I'm going to have the spawn room just be a 5x5 grid. And it's going to determine the amount of faces, so let's up this to It's returning to the normal values that I'd like. I want it to have a weighted... It's weighted to be 40, 40, 20. So 40% of the time it'll either be 1 exit, 40% it'll be 2 exits, and the other 20% will be 3 exits. So this should work fine. I haven't... This is tested at the moment for just 1 facing. 2 and 3 facings, it can work, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's kind of playing nice. It's actually played quite nice. But it still spawned doors that you probably wouldn't use, because if you were in the dungeon, you would come to this door and there's nothing beyond it. Oh, also another thing that I do need to input is that there's no entrance door yet, but that's something that can be remedied. But it's another thing on the long list of things to do. And here is a case of the rooms colliding together. But it's a lot of stuff to work on. But at the moment, I'm happy that it generates all the rooms, and it generates them organically rather than being limited to a grid, so I don't have to worry about boundaries. Let's return to the blueprint. So it determines the amount of faces. It then detects the face and gives that floor a value, and then makes sure that another... For example, if I want a north-facing exit, it will not spawn another one. So we set a boolean to make sure that doesn't happen. And then we have a bunch of math to detect the floor tiles, because it goes the bottom row, the IDs for those floors. For example, in a 5x5 grid would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Go up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Go up 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on. So for the top ones, we're detecting the top row, and because it's a variable grid, we have to do this with math. So it's just detecting the top X of that row. So if I 5x5, it would be IDs 20 to 24. On the east, it's doing some different math to detect all the ones on the right, because they're not all the same. For a 5x5, it would be 4, 9, 14, 19, 24. But there's a pattern there, and we use some math to detect that pattern and to pick a random one of those to be the east-facing wall, east-facing exit, sorry, if that has been chosen. So it does that for the south and west. We then generate the floors, and here's a new bit from last time. It's going to save the location of these tiles, and this is what makes it variable. We don't actually save the IDs of the floor. It's renewed every single time, but the only thing we do save is the location of the exits, so that way we can spawn a hallway from this exit, which is over here. It will spawn a hallway, and then once it repeats the loop, it will detect where to spawn the new room, and then it will make the walls. Once it spawns the floors and saves the locations of the exits, it's going to spawn the walls and the pillars. Actually, that's something I haven't talked about. If I can... I should be able to showcase this. It might not be immediately transparent. So, when I'm spawning a wall, we're spawning pillars separately, and there's a reason for that. Because this might get a little technical, it's hard to explain. Quite simply, I'll see how I can do, but if I were to spawn the wall with 2 pillars, this wall here, let me respawn and get the cursor up. There we go. Oh. Okay, so this one here, and this one here. If I were to spawn the walls with 2 pillars, then the polygons here would be colliding with each other, and that would not be good, because when you look up to it, you'll see 2 pillars that are there, and you'll have a lot of Z-fighting. And if the pillars are rotated, it might not be the same on each side, so you're going to see 2 conflicting pillars. So here's what I did. Instead of that, we have the walls and pillars separated, and we have, for example, a 5x5 grid are the floors and walls. The pillars are a 6x6 grid, it's one higher, and we detect the floor and we detect the walls. And based on the pattern, it will detect how to do the pillars. So, if I remember correctly, this floor is going to detect that there is no floor here, so it must spawn a wall. However, it will then detect the other floors left and right, and with some other stuff, it will detect whether it should spawn a pillar or not. and then it's going to check the grid whether to spawn a pillar there. And if there's a pillar already there, then it will not spawn a pillar, and thus we don't have two pillars on one spot, it's just one pillar. I think that's how it works. Let's take a quick check. I believe that's how I implemented it. So yeah, it's going to spawn the walls, then it's going to detect what kind of pillar to spawn on that floor tile. So it's going to check each one, and then it's going to detect whether a wall spawns, and then using some math it's going to detect what pillars to spawn. I'm not going to go too in depth into it because that'll take a long while and I'll probably butcher what I did. And I'll probably not even remember it correctly as well. But yeah, that's how it works so far for the walls and pillars. When we get to the facing, it's going to detect what facing it is. So it's a north facing one. It's going to detect the location. It's going to detect it here, and then it's going to move the hallway floor spawn point up. So if there's two, let's get it up. I'm sure we can find a north facing hallway. Here we go. Ignore the fact that that's there. That was random generation being annoying for this demonstration, but it's going to spawn. It's detected the location. It's going to move north 128 because we only move floor tiles in 128 by the X or Y direction, because the model is 128 long and in length in both X and Y. Then it's going to do it again because it's telling me I want to spawn two tiles, because it spawns a hallway between 1 and 3 tiles. If it were 3 tiles, this room would be moved up 1 by 128. Once the hallway is spawned, it will then randomly determine the origin point, because the origin point of a room is 0, 0, which is the bottom left corner. It's going to spawn it on a left to right. So in this case, it spawned it at tile number 4. So it's moved the origin point, which would normally be here, where this floor is missing. It has moved it 4 to the left, in which is 712 in the negative Y direction. And we can see that in the code. When I open the blueprint, you can see that in the code here. It's shifting the origin point of that room. So, and it will do that differently for the east, south and west facing in its own ways. So it will spawn the hallway, spawn the room, and by changing the origin point, we're going to get a different result each time. Otherwise we'd have a very uniform grid of rooms. So yeah, that's about it in terms of blueprint. It is a horrible mess, and once it's all completed it'll be optimized much greater using functions and all that. Here's all the variables I'm using. There are a lot of variables, a lot of arrays. So let's get it back up. Whew, that was a horrible one. But let's end it on a much better. Like, let's change this back to the test values of one face, because it works fine with that. Oh, that was horrible. Come on. It's not cooperating nicely, but regardless, this just showcases a number of things it needs to do. The checklist of what it needs to do is to make sure that rooms don't collide with each other, and that it doesn't spawn an exit where there's an entrance. So it shouldn't spawn this, yeah, because it spawned from the north and then it spawned an exit to the south. That shouldn't happen. And I also need to make sure that there's a valid path between rooms. But ultimately, once all that's done, the art side of it is underway for this project. Hopefully it will look like a nice fantasy dungeon. And some other things is having, like, checking things where to put a 3x3 room tile, for example. That can be a cool thing. But that's much extra. At the moment, I want to get this basic room generation done, and once that's done, finish all the art assets, check them all, and that'll be done. And also have a nice animation for the doors when you walk up to them. They'll open, and then you can walk through. And have a ceiling. And also, eventually, we can add some stairs, because this isn't constrained by a grid. We can just up the entire blueprint, like everything, by 128 in the Z direction, and suddenly, we're 128 up. This is now a 3D dungeon. So yeah, I'm happy that I made it like this. It's still a lot of work, but it's not constrained by a grid. So yeah, that's the state of it so far, and how it's currently doing, how it currently works, and what I need to do. My name's been Chris Hollywood, and if for some reason you're still watching, I thank you for watching. And goodbye.